And a good early evening to you all, my friends. Hope you're all well. And it's a rather tragic story with this one. Remember when we were at the William the Conqueror, I said to bear the lifeboat name of the Mary Stanford in mind? Well, this is the story of it. This former lifeboat house was built in 1882 and it is named after the Mary Stanford Lifeboat. On the 15th of November 1928, the Mary Stanford was lost with all 17 crew. This is the largest loss of life from a single lifeboat in the history of the RNLI. The lifeboat house was never used by a lifeboat again. At 5 a.m. the Mary Stanford was called to assist the Latvian steamer the Alice of Riga. The crew ran from Rye Harbour to the lifeboat house to launch the boat at around 6:45 in a fierce southwesterly gale. Just as they were leaving, news came that the Alice's crew had already been rescued. A signal was fired to recall the Mary Stanford, but nobody saw it in the driving rain and the rush to get away. 3.5 hours later, a boy collecting driftwood on Camber Sands saw the Mary Stanford capsize. Every man on board was drowned. The tight-knit fishing community of Rye Harbour Villiage was devastated. At the churchyard in Rye Harbour, you can see a memorial to the men who served on the Mary Stanford. This photo shows an early 20th century crew at Lifeboat House doors. They were wearing life jackets, which were a major advance in safety of the time. The Mary Stanford was an RNLI lifeboat supplied in 1916. The previous lifeboat pictured here was the John William Dudley. Both boats were only powered by sail and oars. When the lifeboat house was in use, it stood 60 metres from the shore. It is more than 2 km from Rye Harbour Village to the watch houses. Remember I showed you the lifeboat house there, the old one with the watchtower? Then across a salt marsh to the lifeboat house. But this was the best place to launch a boat, no matter what the state of the tide. The boat was pulled from the shore using a capstan behind the lifeboat house. The ropes ran right through the building, which originally had doors at both ends. This photo, taken in the 1940s, shows the powerful effect of shingle movement. Today the wooden sea defences are failing and the lifeboat house foundations are sometimes exposed. Only the base of the Second World War pillbox remains and has been tipped on its side. I can take you to the Mary Stanford Lifeboat House, and this is where those brave men, you think they ran all the way from Rye Harbour Village, which is quite some distance, so they must have been fit as fiddles. They ran all the way from there to here to launch that boat to save the crew of the Alice. They'd already been rescued, and sadly these men all lost their lives. Mary Stanford Lifeboat House. On Remembrance Day they put a poppy wreath here every year because a lot of the men had served in the First World War, and a few of them had. The lifeboatman: "Do not weep upon my grave, I am not there, I did not die. I am the seagull overhead in the harbour here at Rye. The mighty ocean took me from my kin and family. and my very last hours upon this earth were in a raging, angry sea. But peace and love and goodness can come from tragedy. Though these mortal chains are broken, my spirit's flying free. So when you hear me calling, as I wheel across the sky, it's to say I'm watching over you. Do not weep, I did not die. By Carol Hunt Mitchum, adapted from a poem accredited to Mary Fry. And these are the names of the lifeboatmen: Herbert Head, Joseph Stonham, Henry Cutting, Albert Ernest Cutting, Robert Redvers Cutting, Walter Eggleston, Charles Southerden, James Alfred Head, Charles Frederick David Pope, Louis Alexander Pope, Robert Henry Pope, Albert Ernest Smith, Leslie George Clark, William Thomas Albert Clark, Arthur William Downey and Morris Downey. John Stanley Head, the 17 brave men who lost their lives at sea on the 15th of November 1928 in thanks of their bravery and loving kindness to those in distress on the sea. And notice that quite a few of those surnames were the same. This was the older sign they had up for it, but it's fast dilapidating. The reason some of those names are the same is a few of those men were brothers, and they were of some of the others related to each other, which is a real tragedy because whole families were wiped out in that disaster. As it said, all that remains of the shore is the base of the old World War II pillbox, which you can see here. Coastal erosion is really doing its work, and there were indeed two doors on this one at the front and one at the back, and that's where the ropes went in and out. And those brave men launched that boat from here to go and save souls in distress, and well, the rest is tragic history. It originally had windows as well. And that's the Mary Stanford Lifeboat House. And as it said on the sign, there is the memorial to them in the churchyard at Rye Harbour Village, where they're all buried, which is over that way in the distance. So that's where you're going to join me next. And it's such a tragic story, isn't it? I mean, there's no getting around that. So join me at Rye Harbour Village Church for the next part of our video. This is the Church of the Holy Spirit at Rye Harbour and its churchyard. And this is where those poor men, brave men, will lie buried. To the memory of the 17 brave men, the crew of the Mary Stanford Lifeboat, who perished in a heavy gale whilst gallantly responding to the call for help from the SS Alice of Riga on the morning of the 15th of November 1928. We have done that which was our duty, it says just above our lifeboat man there, and quite a few of these men are related to each other. Charles Southerden, aged 22 years. Leslie George Clark, aged 24 years. And his brother, William Thomas Albert Clark, aged 27 years. Walter Eggleston, aged 38 years. And there's 3 from the same family here. I don't know whether they're all brothers or not, but it seems quite likely. Lewis Alexander Pope, aged 21 years. Robert Henry Pope, aged 23 years. Charles Frederick David Pope, aged 28 years. Joseph Stonham, 2nd coxswain, aged 43 years. Herbert Head, coxswain of the boat, aged 47 years. Henry Cutting, bowman, aged 39 years. And there's 2 of his relations are there as well, which we'll see in a minute. John Stanley Head, aged 17 years, and his brother James Alfred Head, aged 19 years. Another 2 brothers here. Morris Downey, aged 23 years. Arthur William Downey, aged 25 years. Albert Ernest Smith, aged 44 years. And here are the other 2 Cuttings. Albert Ernest Cutting, aged 26 years. And Robert Redvers Cutting, aged 28 years. All families wiped out in one tragic incident. I always pop by and pay my respects to them, because then and now the lifeboatmen do save a hell of a lot of lives. Unfortunately, these fellas lost their lives. And we say a respectful goodbye to them. As we head towards the Lich Gate and remember other men from the First World War. This is a beautiful little church, it really is. Obviously, being a weekday and being evening time, the church is closed. So if you've not seen my coverage of it and you'd like to, click the link in the description box. It's a small little church that served the fishing harbour village of Rye Harbour. A very close-knit little community it was. And this is the Lich Gate. Lich Gates were where coffins were usually received by the vicar. This Lich Gate and tablet in the church were erected in honour of the men from this parish who served in the Great War of 1914 to 1918. The following gave their lives for their king and country in the Great War of 1914 to 1918. The following served in His Majesty's forces during the Great War of 1914 to 1918. And we say a very respectful goodbye to all of these men as well. And that is the little harbour church of the Holy Spirit, and the resting place of all the men of the Mary Stanford Lifeboat. May they all rest in peace, eh?